Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by just welcoming everyone. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice to see all of you guys here. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well. Today is our group learning program where I share teachings to help students to be able to understand the path to enlightenment. And what I do each Sunday is I start with meditation, but then I move into a talk from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This week we're in chapter 7, which is titled The Five Precepts, a Householder's Guide to Daily Life. This is where you learn 5 impactful decisions that you can either make wisely or unwisely that are going to lead to either wholesome results or unwholesome results. If you've ever heard that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants, the Buddha actually didn't teach that. That's not from the Buddha. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. I'm actually going to use his original words so you can see what he taught on this important teaching, and then I'm going to show you how to apply it to your day-to-day life and decisions that you're making in your day-to-day life so that as you make those decisions wisely, you can experience wholesome results. So welcome again to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone online as well. If you'd like to join for meditation, I'm going to start with some chanting to ease us into the meditation, and you're welcome to chant along if you'd like. We have the chants over there on the laminated sheet on the cabinet. You're welcome to help yourself to get a laminated sheet, and you'll be able to chant along during the chanting portion of our meditation. And for those of you guys that are online, you can find these by going to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com. Click on free books, and from there you can scroll down to the bottom and you'll see the daily chanting sheet there. In terms of these chants, the Buddha, during his lifetime, he used chanting as a way to help his students commit the teachings to memory. Every 2 weeks, the students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally. This is how he helped them to be able to remember his teachings, because they didn't have books and videos and podcasts and audiobooks and all these other things during the lifetime of the Buddha. So chanting was used every 2 weeks, where his students would come together and they would recite his teachings orally, because everything he taught was oral. Today, we don't need to chant in order to remember the teachings, because we have books and audiobooks and videos and podcasts to be able to help us remember the teachings and commit them to memory and actually study them. But we still chant because it helps to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. So if you decide to chant, you'll be able to see that it actually helps you in your meditation practice. You can see from the origins of chanting that there isn't anything mystical or magical about chanting. It was used purely as a learning device. So the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. These are all things that you might see today that some people will associate with the teachings of the Buddha, but those aren't actually the teachings of the Buddha. He never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or even prayer. You can see this in his own words. He's teaching you to train your mind and cultivate your mind. He's not teaching you to believe in these kinds of rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer. So when we're chanting these, that's not what this is about. It's about helping to ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation itself. And you can see from the origins of chanting that the Buddha used it purely as a learning device to help his students commit the teachings to memory. Now, as you might read the English translations, you're going to see a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for the Buddha. And because of that, I don't think the Buddha even created these chants himself. They were probably created by his students, either during his life or after his death, because a Buddha wouldn't walk around and say, "Here, chant these things to me out of respect for me." This would be arrogance or pride. And an individual who's gotten to enlightenment, they would have eliminated their ego. They would no longer think of themselves as being above other people or below other people. So the Buddha wouldn't have walked around and taught people to chant things to him out of respect for him. But if you learn from a teacher how to move from anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings to the peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state, and this teacher didn't want anything from you or expect anything from you, you might actually have a lot of appreciation, gratitude, and respect for that person too. And that's where I suspect these chants came from, is the students, either during his life or after his death, because they would have had an enormous amount of respect for him because of what his teachings help you to be able to do, which is get to this enlightened mental state. So if you'd like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. After the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance to be able to help you during the meditation, or I'm actually going to be essentially teaching you and instructing you in meditation while we're actually meditating together. So you'll hear me do that for a period of time. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet and we're all meditating together. Everyone here at the temple and anybody who's at home, you can be meditating with us. So as we're meditating during that period of time of quietness, I'm sure you're going to hear occasional sounds because you can't be in an environment where it's permanently quiet. You might hear a dog barking, a bird chirping, you might hear a car going by or something like this. As you hear those sounds, if you have a craving for permanent silence during your meditation, you will cause your mind to be angry or frustrated or annoyed. It's your own mind that's causing that. It's not the outside world that's causing your discontent feelings. So when you're in meditation, just know that you're going to hear sounds. You might hear someone sneeze or cough or something like that. And that's completely normal. That's the impermanent nature of the world. But if your mind craves permanence, you'll struggle and have difficulties in certain areas of your life where you're craving permanence because things are going to be constantly changing in your life. So these sounds that you hear during meditation, they're going to arise, they're going to change, and then they're going to fade away. And you can understand that this is the world functioning exactly the way it was intended to function with impermanence. And as long as you don't have a craving for permanence, when you hear those sounds, you can reside peaceful and joyful during the meditation. Then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and that's where I'll start today's class, helping you guys to understand the 5 precepts. In terms of your body position for meditation, the Buddha taught 4 positions. He taught seated, lying, standing, and walking. And you would need these different positions at different times. So students will typically learn these in their journey to enlightenment. It's kind of like creating a tool belt for yourself so you can use these different tools at different times in your journey to enlightenment. But since most students are oftentimes learning in the seated position, I'll provide you some guidance on the seated position just to be able to help you as you're getting started in this journey. So you can sit however you're comfortable. There isn't just one fixed way to sit. You could sit on the floor, you could sit in a chair. Maybe if you're at home, you're on a bench or a sofa or in a wheelchair. You can sit however you're comfortable. There isn't just one fixed way to sit because that would be permanence, and we live in an impermanent world. Different people are going to find things to be comfortable. So you need to find what's comfortable for you. I'll share with you some guidance that can maybe help you to find something that's even more comfortable for you than you have right now. But just remember that what I'm sharing with you are just suggestions or just things for you to consider. And you can sit however you like, even if it's not something that I've actually taught. So if you're on the floor, you might sit with some cushions under your rear. This is pretty common because it softens your seat and helps you to feel more comfortable when you're sitting. If you're going to sit with your legs crossed, you might just do that lightly because if they're real tight, it can impede the circulation. It could cause pain in the lower body. Sometimes people like to put their legs off the mat. This helps to get the hips up in the air. And it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, again, allowing the circulation to flow. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If this is comfortable, you could use it, but again, it's not about everyone doing it exactly the same way. Some people might decide to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees, their palms up. Some people even rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can find whatever's comfortable for you. And then for anybody who's in a chair or in a sofa or a bench or a wheelchair, you can also sit however you're comfortable. Sometimes people like to put their feet flat on the floor or lightly crossed at the ankles, but you can see me sitting in a chair here with my legs crossed, so this is an option for you as well. And then you can put your hands and arms wherever you're comfortable. In terms of your upper body, it's helpful if this is erect, with your sternum up and your shoulders back. It'll help keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're cultivating certain wholesome qualities in the mind. And you would like the mind to be attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be dull or lethargic. But if you're real rigid, the mind could be overactive or uptight. So you'd like the upper body to be in the middle with the sternum up and the shoulders back, because it'll keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, but it'll also make it easy for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting. You guys are welcome to join in, and then I'm going to come back in with some guidance to help you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Kewa O Tang Maha Kewanhang Api Wate Ami Sawakato Maha Kewata Tammo Damang Namasami Supatipano Maha Kewato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Sama Sambuddhassa Iti piso emakewa Arahang Sama Sammuto Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโอตังมหาเกวันนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone here at the temple. Welcome to everyone online who's joining as well. As I was mentioning, today is our group learning program where I'm helping students to be able to gradually understand the teachings of the Buddha, to be able to help you to move your mind to enlightenment. This is a 7-month program where I gradually walk students through this first book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Today we're in chapter 7, which is titled The Five Precepts, A Householder's Guide to Daily Practice. And I'm going to share with you guys the content from the book in this particular chapter so that you can understand what the Buddha taught on this important topic and how to apply it to your day-to-day life. So far in this program, I've taught many different things. One of the things that I taught was the Eightfold Path. This is the core central teaching of the Buddha that's going to help you to be able to understand how to train your mind to get to enlightenment. What enlightenment is where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings and others are eliminated from the mind. And this is occurring through training of the mind. There are certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered that need to be uprooted and eliminated out of the mind. And you do that through training of the mind. And by training the mind, you can actually experience the complete peace and joy that is the enlightened mental state. You'll notice that by the time you get to enlightenment, that your mind is focused. You'll have concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Because these pollutions, when they're in your mind, it creates a muddled mind, or it lacks concentration. It's difficult to go through the world with an unenlightened mind. So you'll have struggles and difficulties. That's what that stress and anxiety and the guilt and shame and fear and anger and all those feelings, that's helping you to be able to see that your mind is not yet awake, that it's not fully trained yet. you'll notice that by the time you get to enlightenment, that your personal, professional relationships are really blossoming. Because when you have an unenlightened mind, you'll be bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships. And that stuff will all come back to you. And you'll firmly believe that it's other people that are causing you to be angry, but this isn't actually true. It's your own mind that's causing these feelings, and this is why you can actually eliminate them. You can get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood any longer. So the Eightfold Path, the very first teaching on that path, is helping you to be able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these feelings. It's something called craving, desire, attachment. The mind is longing, yearning. The mind is chasing after the objects of its affection, and when it gets what it wants, it gets pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But when the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. These are very painful for the mind to experience. Then there's feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant, like shyness or uncomfortableness. This is a much lighter version of a discontent feeling. But nonetheless, the mind is actually causing this itself, and you can independently verify this. None of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief. You're not believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens for you when you die. That's not what the teachings of the Buddha are for. It's to help you to learn and grow and develop to a wonderful life now, in this life. It's not about an afterlife. It's about getting to a wonderful life now, because the stress and anxiety that you're experiencing or any other discontent feelings, you don't need to experience that. You can completely opt out of that. Just like you opt out of a mailing list, you might unsubscribe and say, nope, not interested in those emails any longer. You can do the same thing with anger and sadness and frustration and say, nope, not interested in that any longer. And you can actually train your mind to get to the point where it's completely peaceful and joyful. So this Eightfold Path is helping you to be able to see various aspects of how to train your mind to get to this enlightened mental state. So that's where somebody would actually start with learning and growing and developing on the path to enlightenment. But then this Eightfold Path being a core central teaching, there's other teachings that plug into it to help you understand it more and how to practice it more deeply. Because when you dial this Eightfold Path in really closely in your life, that's where the peace and joy starts to come shining through. Sometimes people think the Buddha sat under a tree, he meditated and instantly got to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. You can see in his own teachings that it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know this to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been that way. Whether it's learning to read, write, and speak a certain language, or whether it's a job or occupation that you have, it's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that has led to any kind of improvement in your life. And it's the same thing with the path to enlightenment. So when we talk about awakening to enlightenment, what we're talking about awakening to is what's called the natural laws. There's natural laws that the Buddha taught. Namely, he taught the natural law of Kamma. He's helping you to be able to see this cause and effect about the world and how it functions, and that when you make certain decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome Kamma or wholesome results. And when you make certain decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. And as you go around the world, if you don't have wisdom of this natural law, you're going to tend to make unwise decisions, and you'll be experiencing unwholesome results in your life. And oftentimes what people do with a lack of wisdom of this natural law is they will blame what they're experiencing on other people, because it couldn't be you that's led to this, right? Oftentimes what people do is they take credit for the wholesome things that are happening in their life, but then when unwholesome things are happening in their life, it's blamed on someone else. And you can't have it both ways. You need to be able to see the truth about the world, that everything you're experiencing is a result of your decisions. Sometimes people think that what they're experiencing is based in good luck or bad luck, or they might think it's destiny or fate, or they might think it's a being like God or some entity called the universe that is controlling what you experience on a given day. Or again, people might blame other people and say that it's other people that's causing them to experience something. Well, if you subscribe to this kind of thinking and you continue to think that way, basically you're locked in. You're a robot. You can't change anything about your life because you can't change good luck or bad luck. You can't change destiny or fate. You can't change God or some entity called the universe, and you can't change other people. So if you continue to think this way, that it's these other things that are causing you to experience unwholesome results, you're locked in. You can't change anything about your life. But if you can see true reality, that it is your decisions that are leading to any particular result, this is very empowering. Because if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But again, if it's these other things that are causing what you experience in your life, you can't change any of that. But what the Buddha helps you to be able to see is that you can change any aspect of your life. You can change your life. You can make wiser and wiser decisions, getting to more and more wholesome results in your life, living an ideal life. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even have the slightest ickiness in your mind. But navigating the world with a lack of wisdom and this natural law, you'll struggle. You'll have difficulties. Just like we fell down and hurt ourselves because we didn't understand the natural law of gravity, just like we struggled as a little kid because we didn't understand that natural law, the same thing is occurring with this natural law. Because when we were children, we cried and we were so upset because we didn't understand the world that we lived in. But slowly but surely, we awoke to this natural law of gravity. We might say we cultivated wisdom about this natural law, and then we were able to navigate the world more peacefully. That's where we learned to tie our shoes a bit tighter. We learned to look at the surface of the sidewalk when we were walking. We stopped being so giddy and bouncing around like a little kid. And now we can do things like climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes, travel all over the world, because we fully awoke to the natural law of gravity and we don't struggle with it any longer. But this natural law, oftentimes people are not awake to it. So when you learn more and more about this natural law, you can now navigate the world making wiser and wiser decisions, and you will experience wholesome results. So what the 5 precepts are, is it's helping you to be able to see the natural law of Kamma in terms of your moral conduct. The Buddha's Eightfold Path goes into a lot of detail about moral conduct, helping you to be able to see the wise decisions that are going to lead to wholesome results or wholesome Kamma in your life. But it's the 5 precepts that kind of plug into the Eightfold Path, providing you more details, more depth to be able to understand the moral conduct. So whenever you're studying teachings like what I'm about to share with you, it's important that you don't think of them as rules or commandments. It's also important to not see it as black and white, because that's oftentimes what people do with teachings like this. They might think that even that the Buddha is trying to convince them to do one thing or the other. And this isn't actually true. What he's helping you to be able to see is the natural law. Whatever decisions you make about your life, that's up to you. The Buddha is not going to try to convince you or force you or control you to do any particular thing. It's your life, your decisions, and your results. Remember, the Buddha had already gotten to enlightenment. His mind was peaceful. His mind was joyful. He wasn't trying to convince people to do anything. He was just helping you to be able to understand what it took for him to be able to get to that peaceful and joyful mental state. And if you're interested in knowing what that is, that's what his teachings are all about. His teachings aren't here to convince you of anything. They're not a bunch of beliefs or rituals or ceremonies or things like this. Instead, he's helping you to be able to awaken to this natural law. And this comes through investigating and examining his teachings, through reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then through practicing them, integrating them into your day-to-day life. So as we go today, I'm going to pause a few times and open up to any questions that you guys might have. Whether you're here at the temple or you're online, you can ask any questions that you like as I'm going through today's content and helping you to be able to learn the 5 precepts. If you would like to ask questions here at the temple, we have microphones here in the white bowl. If you could just come up and get a microphone, you can take it back to your seat. If you press the gray button, you're going to see the lights come on, and then you just wait a second, hold it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you online as well. If you speak here without a microphone, they won't be able to hear you online. And then if you would like to keep these with you, you can keep it with you, because you might have more than one question, or someone around you might have a question, and you can just share the microphone. And if you're not using it, if you could just turn it off, that way we won't get feedback through the speakers, that would be really great. And then for anyone who's online, if you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and you would like to ask questions, you can put that into the comment section and I'll be able to see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and then ask any all questions that you like that way. So this natural law of Kamma is what the Buddha is helping you to be able to awaken to. And that's what I'm going to help you to be able to see with the 5 precepts. So what are the 5 precepts? It's guidance that's going to significantly reduce unwholesome Kamma production. It's assisting you in developing a pure mind in a pure life, because these 5 precepts are going to help you to knock down some of the pollutions that are in the mind. And I'll help you to be able to see this as we go through the 5 precepts. I'll help you to be able to see how they're not rules, they're not commandments. It's actually helping you to eliminate certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. The Eightfold Path is what's going to help you to completely eliminate all unwholesome Kamma, but it's the 5 precepts that's going to help you to significantly reduce it. So you need to understand the 5 precepts as well. By the time you fully practice the Eightfold Path for an extended period of time, you will extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma, and you will only be experiencing wholesome Kamma. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're not experiencing any unwholesome Kamma anymore. You're experiencing exclusively wholesome Kamma. So the detailed teachings that are the Eightfold Path, these 5 precepts integrate into them, helping you to understand how to practice harmlessness. Because as you cause harm to other beings, this harm is just going to come back to you. So the 5 precepts are going to help you to understand how to not cause harm to a certain level of degree about certain topics. But then the Eightfold Path is really going to expand that for you, giving you much more detail, as well as all the other teachings of the Buddha. But this is kind of like a microscope, putting certain aspects of your practice under a microscope to be able to see how to fully train your mind. And then these are going to now integrate into the Eightfold Path, which is going to give you the complete plan to be able to fully transform your mind. As you learn the 5 precepts, you might actually start seeing some things that you've learned from other people in your life, like your mom or your dad or your aunts or uncles or teachers or mentors or bosses and things like this. Because these natural laws, different people have tapped into them at different times throughout history. And you might have heard different people explain these things in different ways. But I think you'll see when you see the words of the Buddha, he describes these 5 precepts in a very clear, concise, and precise way, in a way that you might not have been exposed to before. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the words of the Buddha, helping you to see what he taught on this important topic. And then I'm going to relate it to day-to-day decisions that you're going to be making so that you can decide for yourself how to apply these teachings. I'm not here to convince you of what you should or shouldn't do in your life. You're an adult. You can choose for yourself of what to do. But I'm going to help you to be able to see this natural law in a way that you might not be looking at it right now. So this first precept, the Buddha shares, abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. So sometimes people translate this as no killing. That's not what the Buddha said, right? That sounds like black and white. It sounds like a rule or commandment. The Buddha is teaching you something much deeper than just no killing. And whenever you're studying the teachings of the Buddha and you see his words, it's important that you don't believe what you see. It's important that you don't just assume that you know what he's talking about. Instead, you need to investigate and examine his teachings. So whenever you see something like this, you can see that what he's talking about is living compassionately for all living beings. Well, don't assume that you know what a living being is. You're going to need to investigate and examine this to make sure that you know what a living being is. And if you're causing harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. That's what the Buddha is teaching you. And he's teaching you to live compassionately towards all living beings. What compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. So we need to understand what is a living being. So the Buddhist teachings help you to understand what is a living being. You need to be able to figure this out so that you can make decisions wisely to not cause harm to a living being. And again, you shouldn't assume that you know what a living being is. So he has a teaching called the 5 aggregates. You might think of this as the 5 criteria or the 5 elements or the 5 collections, the 5 things that determine what is a living being. And when you understand these 5 aggregates, you can see that, yes, this describes what a living being is. And this definition is held up for 2,500 years because he's teaching you based on the natural laws. So he teaches that what a living being is And remember, don't believe the teachings. You can reflect on what I'm teaching you right here because you know that you are a living being, and you will see that you have all 5 of these things. What the Buddha shares that the 5 aggregates are, the 5 criteria of what makes a living being, is that a living being is going to have physical form. You know that you have physical form, right? You have a physical body. He says a living being is going to have feelings. You know that you have feelings. Pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. He says a living being has perceptions. What perceptions are like views and opinions about the world. They look out at the world in a certain way, and they form certain opinions based on those things that they see in the world. A living being is going to have what's called volitional formations. These are choices and decisions. They're going to have free will. They're going to be able to make decisions about what they experience in life. Then a living being is going to have a consciousness or a mind. Okay, so there's form, physical form, feelings, perceptions, which are views and opinions, and then there's volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then there's a consciousness or a mind. And you can see you have all 5 of those things. But you can also see a squirrel has those. A bird has those. A fish has those. A cow, a dog. These are all things that have the 5 aggregates. But then don't stop there with your investigation of the teachings of the Buddha. Take something that you know is not a living being and reflect to see if it has all 5 of these aggregates. So like this chair that I'm sitting in, does it have physical form? Yeah, it has physical form, right? Does it have feelings? No, it doesn't have feelings, right? It doesn't get sad or frustrated. It doesn't get happy. Does it have perceptions? Does it have views and opinions about the world? No, it doesn't have those, right? Does it have volitional formations? Does it make choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up, walk down the street, and put itself somewhere else? No, can't do that, right? And does it have a consciousness or a mind? No, it doesn't have that either, right? So you can see a non-living being, which you know to be a non-living being, it doesn't meet these 5 criteria. And this is how you independently verify that something that the Buddha is teaching is actually true, is that you don't believe it. You look in the world around you through your own direct experience to determine whether it's true or false. And this is where you get wisdom. Okay, so the 5 aggregates is determining what is a living being and what is not a living being. Okay, now as you learn that more and more deeply and you start to apply it, that's what's going to teach you what is a living being and what's not a living being. But in your progress towards enlightenment, your progress towards understanding these 5 aggregates, sometimes people need a little bit of a shorthand way to figure these kinds of things out. And that's what I've shared here at the beginning of this chapter and at the beginning of this talk here is a way that you can kind of figure out what is a living being, but it's not the natural law. This doesn't apply in all situations. About 99.9% of the time, a living being is going to come from an egg, a sperm, and it's going to have a consciousness. A living being is always going to have a consciousness, but it doesn't always come from an egg and a sperm. There's actually some living beings in the world that don't originate from an egg and a sperm, and that's why this isn't the natural laws. The 5 aggregates are the natural laws, but sometimes people need a little shorthand way to figure this out, and this is going to help you in most situations. But ultimately, you would like to learn the 5 aggregates. And when you learn the 5 aggregates and you learn this, you can understand things like plants and bacteria and viruses. They're not a living being. And while we might think of these things in a fond way, particularly plants, right? We might say, oh, don't kill that plant, or I'm going to go kill this tree, right? Or I'm going to kill this weed. Someone might say that. This is one of the challenges in the unenlightened state, is because of the mind's lack of wisdom, we will oftentimes say things that aren't actually true. We might say, I'm going to kill this weed. Well, you can't kill that weed. It's not possible because it's not a living being. And you can't kill a bacteria because bacteria or virus is not a living being. So someone might say, I'm going to take this antibiotic and kill this bacteria in the body. Well, that's not a living being because it doesn't have all 5 aggregates, right? So when you come to understand the 5 aggregates and what is a living being, you can see that these things aren't actual living beings. What we're truly doing is we're eliminating that virus, or we're eliminating that bacteria, or we're harvesting this plant. That's what we're truly doing. We're not actually killing it. But because of the lack of wisdom, the mind will oftentimes speak in a way that is untrue. So more and more, you would like to be able to see true reality. And you can see it through the five aggregates, that these things are not living beings, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma. Because if you were to kill a living being, there's going to be harm that you're causing. So therefore, harm's going to come back to you. So if you have a bacteria in the body and you eliminate it out of the body, are you going to experience something wholesome? Or are you going to experience something unwholesome? You're going to experience something wholesome. So if this was a living being, if this bacteria was a living being and you killed it, you would be experiencing unwholesome results, but you actually experience wholesome results. The same thing is true as if you harvested an apple or a broccoli or a cauliflower or something like this. You're actually experiencing wholesome results. You're experiencing the ability to have some food, right? So you can see this through the natural law. So the Buddha here is teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So now let's look at some things that we might encounter as we go through life. Euthanasia of a human or an animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killings, and murder. These are all intentional killings, but whether or not an individual should do these things is going to come down to your individual decisions. Again, I'm not here to convince you of what you should or shouldn't do in your life. I'm here to help you to be able to see the natural law of Kamma. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a couple of these examples and show you how to apply this precept that the Buddha is teaching you. So let's take one here called termination of pregnancy. Now, some people refer to this as a political discussion. I don't think of it that way. This is a medical technology that we have, and in some situations, we could use this medical technology in a beneficial way that could be very helpful. But in some situations, we could use it in a way that's harmful. But whether somebody chooses to use this or not, it's a choice for them to make. It's not up to me to tell people what they should or shouldn't be doing with their body. In fact, if somebody came to me and asked me whether they should terminate their pregnancy or not, I wouldn't say yes or no. That's not a decision for me to make. I would say, if you terminate the pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate the pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And then the person can decide for themselves of what would be the best decision for them. So let me give you some examples here where terminating a pregnancy could actually be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And I'll give you an example of where it could not be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So let's just say I was a female, which obviously I'm not. I don't have a womb in this body to become pregnant. But if I was, and a doctor came to me and said, hey, this fetus that's growing inside your womb, it's never going to live a viable life outside the womb, because doctors can tell this through medical technology. And they might tell me at that same time that as long as you leave this fetus growing inside your womb, it's threatening your life and you could die at any moment. And they suggest to terminate the pregnancy. Well, if I terminate this pregnancy, this would be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because the first being that you need to have compassion for is yourself. If you don't have concern for your own misfortune, how could you practice compassion for other beings? So in this situation, you might decide to terminate the pregnancy and know that you don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel shameful. You haven't done anything harmful in this situation, because you're actually doing a medical procedure that's going to produce wholesome Kamma, that now this being who you are can live continuously for the remaining time of this life. And now you've just produced wholesome Kamma in that situation. But in another situation, let's just say that I was regularly having sex with lots of different people. I was regularly getting pregnant, and I was using termination of pregnancy as birth control. And maybe 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 times, I was terminating a pregnancy, taking the life of this child inside the womb. Well, if I did this regularly, each time I do this medical procedure, it's going to cause more and more harm to this body, because I'm causing harm to the fetus and the baby inside the womb. And now over time, each time I have one of these medical procedures, it's going to cause more and more harm and sickness to this body. Where the first example, that's probably like a once in a lifetime situation, maybe twice. But in this other situation where someone would be regularly having sex, if I was doing that and using termination of pregnancy as birth control, I'm now causing harm to these beings. And now harm is going to come to me, because each time I have one of these medical procedures is causing more and more harm to the body. So you can see in this situation that in some situations it might be wise to terminate a pregnancy, in other situations maybe not. But ultimately it's a decision for each person to make. It's not my decision to make for any other person. Now here, notice that we have war, right? War or some government-sponsored killing. Maybe a government might say, hey, we would like you to go over there and kill those people. And if you go kill those people, we're completely fine with that. But if you come over here on our land and you kill people here, we're going to arrest you for murder. In this kind of situation, this is a human decision. This is a human law. This isn't the natural law. You can't run and hide and escape from the natural law of Kamma. So if someone goes off to war and they kill, while their government might say that we're not going to arrest you for murder, that person is still going to experience the results of their decisions. They can potentially become injured. They can be killed themselves. They can have certain traumatic brain injuries. They might get addicted to drugs and alcohol and substances and things like this. They might actually come back home and commit suicide. This is something that tends to happen. This person might actually have difficulties reintegrating into society in terms of getting a job or securing housing, making friends and things of this nature. These are all the challenges and difficulties of having gone off to war and killed that now this individual can experience being killed themselves, injured, or having any of these other effects that happen to them. This is the natural law of Kamma. It's not punishments and rewards. It's not mystical or magical. It's none of that. It's just the results of your decisions. That if you make a decision to kill another living being, you're going to experience the results of that. In something like war, a government can't negate the natural law of Kamma. They can say, hey, we're not going to arrest you for murder if you go over there and kill those people, but you can't escape the natural law of Kamma. You're going to still experience those unwholesome results. But the Buddha here isn't teaching you black and white, right? There's a big gray area, right? So notice he's not saying don't preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's saying. He's not saying preserve all life at all costs. So let me give you another example that isn't even up here. Let's just say that your house was infested by termites. And this is actually a real thing because at one time our house was attacked by termites. There was these termites that were eating our house. If your house was being eaten by termites, you might decide to take care of this through trying to eradicate them out of your home. Because if you continue to allow these termites to eat your home, this wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because you're going to be out of a house, right? You're not going to have a place to live. You and your family aren't going to have any shelter. So living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings in this situation, what we did is we got on the internet and we started researching to see if there was a way to eradicate these termites without actually killing them. And we started to research this. And what we came back with is right now, no, there's not a way to do that. So my wife ended up calling up the company, and they came to our home and they put down this food that they would eat, and they would take it back to their nest, and then that would take care and eradicate the termites from our home. So in this situation, we were living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. We were interested in getting them to move on without actually killing them, but there wasn't a way to actually do that. So we needed to be able to find this option, because it wouldn't be compassionate to allow these beings to continue to damage our home. And this is the unfortunate part about living in the animal world, is animals don't have the level of consciousness that a human being has. A human being would understand that if we ate wood, that we would go out into the forest and we would eat trees that wouldn't cause any harm to other people. We can understand that as human beings, but an animal doesn't understand that. They don't have that level of consciousness. And because these animals were causing harm, then harm came to them and they ended up being killed because of this. So the Buddha is not teaching you to preserve all life at all cost. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And what this is doing for you is it's knocking down what's called craving, anger, and your ignorance or your unknowing of true reality. These are called the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots. This is a high-level way to refer to the pollutions of the mind. When we get to next week's chapter, chapter 8, I'm going to be teaching you the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots. The mind's craving is like its selfish desires, chasing and wanting things to be a certain way. The mind's anger is the bitterness, the harshness, the hostility, the aggression that the mind has in the unenlightened state. And then the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, is the mind just not understanding the natural laws and how causing harm will then produce harm within your own life. So if we make decision to go out in the world and actively kill and intentionally kill, like say we are to murder a human being, there's a certain amount of craving, desire, selfish desire, wanting things to be a certain way. There's also a certain amount of anger and hostility and bitterness in the mind. And there's also a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality, not understanding that when you cause harm, harm is going to come back to you. So by choosing to practice this precept closely, you're knocking down some of your craving, knocking down some of your anger, and knocking down some of your ignorance, which is going to allow your mind to be more peaceful and more joyful. But it's important to be able to understand that it's not black and white, that you're going to need to be able to look at each individual situation that you're in and decide how to apply this in those situations. So sometimes students ask me about these types of things, like a DNR. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. This is a legal document that some countries have, which is called a do not resuscitate order, where you can actually sign a document that says, if you die, if this body medically is dead, you're informing your relatives, don't bring it back to life. Don't use medical technology to bring it back to life. And there's some people who sign these, and people ask me like, hey, am I practicing this precept if I do this? And I share with them, yes, because you haven't actually killed anybody. You haven't intentionally murdered anybody. You haven't caused the death or caused the harm of anybody. What you're saying when you sign one of those is that you're comfortable with death and don't bring me back to life. So if you have one of these, you're practicing this precept. You don't have to have one of these to practice this precept, but if you do have one, you're still practicing this precept. And then sometimes people ask me about defense or protection, right? So let's just say somebody was breaking into your house at like 3 a.m. in the morning. Maybe they broke your window and they're coming in through your window and you're sleeping. Well, the first thing that I share with people is that person's not bringing you chocolate and flowers, right? That's not what they're there for. At 3 a.m. in the morning, breaking into your window, coming into your house, they're not there to bring you chocolate and flowers. They're there to do harm, right? So you need to be able to understand that they're there to cause harm. So if you need to cause harm in order to stop this harm from coming to you, there's no problem with that. You're not going to experience any unwholesome results. In that situation, you're going to experience wholesome results, because allowing this person to just sit there and stab you with a knife or hit you over the head with a baseball bat, that's unwholesome Kamma. And if you would like to stop this harm coming from you, you might coming to you, you might actually have to cause harm in order for that harm to stop coming to you. So what I teach people to do is to cause the least amount of harm as possible. The first thing to consider is that if you hear somebody coming into your home at 3 a.m. in the morning, if you can get out, right? If they want to steal something, if they want to break something, whatever they'd like to do, just get out, right? That would be the best thing to do. Go to your neighbor's house, get your phone, call the police, let them come. They have the equipment and the training to deal with the situation. Let them deal with it. But remember, these teachings aren't black and white. It's not about, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do that. It's not like a decision tree, because that would be a permanent answer for every single situation. And it's not going to be the case that that's the situation that you're going to find yourself in. Because if you have the idea that every time someone breaks into your house, you're going to leave the house, well, what happens when you look outside and there's a gang of people outside? Or maybe there's a fire and you can't get outside of your house. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do in terms of getting to enlightenment is moving to a higher consciousness where you can understand these natural laws. And now, based on the unique variables that you're experiencing in any given situation, you can make a wise decision that's going to produce wholesome Kamma for yourself. So if you understand this precept, you understand that you're interested in causing the least amount of harm as possible in this situation, and leaving your house when there's a gang outside or when there's a fire that's engulfed the entire neighborhood, that wouldn't be wise to be able to leave the house. So maybe if you're backed up in the corner, if they have a stick, maybe you get a bigger stick, or if they have a knife, maybe you get a bigger knife, right? And you're trying to cause the least amount of harm as possible in this situation. And that's going to stop this harm from coming to you. And now you'll experience wholesome results in that situation. And then sometimes people ask me about moving to plant-based food supply, like being vegan. Oftentimes people who learn these teachings closely and they train their mind, they do choose to move to a plant-based food supply. But again, whether you choose to do that or not, it's a choice for you to make. I'm not here to convince you to do that. It's your life, it's your decisions, and it's your results. But what you will see is that if you move to a plant-based food supply, you're going to see more health in the physical body and in your mind as well. Because when you eat animal flesh, you're not just eating the flesh, but you're also eating certain drugs and hormones and toxins that are in the animal. And when you ingest that, it's affecting the health of the body and the health of the mind. So if you move to a plant-based food supply, you're going to be able to clean all that up, because they've actually taken wild animals from very clean streams. They've taken fish and they've tested the flesh, and they found over 90 different substances that weren't supposed to be there in that fish. Things like antidepressants and even cocaine and things of this nature, because us human beings have been flushing that down the toilet, and now it's polluted our water table, and the fish are absorbing that. And you can also see this in farmed animals too. The farmers are oftentimes putting hormones and antibiotics and things like this into their animals in order to grow them faster and get more profit. So human beings, when they're eating these animals, not only is it causing the death of this animal, but by eating it, you're actually ingesting the drugs and the hormones and the toxins. So whether somebody chooses to continue to do that or not, again, it's a choice for each individual to make. But if you would like to see more health of your physical body and your mind, you'll see that moving to a plant-based food supply is going to help you to be able to do this. And if you are ever interested in doing something like this, I suggest you do it gradually, that you don't just snap your fingers and instantly try to move to a plant-based food supply, because your body and your mind is going to need to adjust and adapt. And you're going to need to find new suppliers for food. You're going to need to find new restaurants. You're going to need to find new recipes and things like this if you like to cook yourself. So it's something that people would typically do gradually over time, not just in a snap of a finger. So do you guys have any questions on this first precept? Anything you guys would like to ask me? Remember here, if you guys could use the microphones, and then online, if you could put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom, I'll answer any questions you guys have. Okay, looks like we have some questions coming in here. Oops, on Zoom. Okay, let me take this. So Melody is asking, if there is a conflict between my welfare and the other parties, what should I do? I think it depends on the situation, and I often feel it's hard to tell the priority. Yeah, each situation is going to be different, Melody. That's why it's important to cultivate your wisdom about these natural laws. And then in the moment, what the Buddha is teaching you to do is remain calm, right? Like if you train your mind, you can be calm and composed in any situation. Right now, if your mind has craving, desire, attachment, your mind can easily be shaken up. And when your mind's shaken up like that, it's going to be hard to make a wise decision. But if you train your mind closely, you can be calm and composed in all situations. This is called equanimity. So by remaining calm and composed, now as you're experiencing any particular variables in your life, you can decide what will be wise in any given situation. Because the Buddha is not giving you a bunch of rules and commandments. He's not giving you a decision tree. He's helping you to be able to see these natural laws, and then you can navigate them more clearly. So when you're first learning something like this, it does appear that there's a big gray area, But the more you become familiar with this and the more you apply it in your day-to-day life and see how to apply it, that gray area disappears and it becomes black and white. It becomes very clear for you. So like if somebody presented a certain scenario to me and they said, David, how would you make this decision? I can tell them very easily how I would make that decision. But the idea of those variables occurring over here as well is, very rare. So each situation is going to be very different. So you need to be able to take in the variables, remain calm, think through your decision, and then figure out what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. Okay, let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. I don't see any questions here. Okay, so now I'm going to move to the next question, the next precept, which is here from the words of the Buddha. Abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. Okay, so obviously the Buddha here is teaching to not steal, because anytime you cause harm to another being, this harm is going to come back to you. And stealing is based in craving, anger, and ignorance. Once again, those pollutions, that what the mind is essentially doing is it has a craving for something, it wants something, but it's not willing to do the work itself, so it wants to steal. And there's a certain amount of anger, ill will towards another being to be able to steal something from someone else. And there's a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality, not realizing you're causing harm to this other being. Because if I was to steal someone's car, I'm causing harm to this person. They now can't go to work. They can't take their kids to school if they have children. They can't go to the store and pick up the basic supplies to survive and sustain their life. I've caused harm to this individual. Now, you can't cause someone else to be discontent. You can't cause someone to be angry or frustrated or sad or any of these other discontent feelings, but you can cause them harm. What it means to cause someone harm is to cause harm to their material possessions, to cause harm to their physical body, or to cause harm to their reputation. If you cause harm to others, that harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha teaches you not to cause harm to other beings. So you need to understand that those are the ways that you could actually cause harm. So by stealing, you're actually causing harm to someone's material possessions. And this harm is going to come back to you, right? These people could easily try to track you down, beat you up. People can get murdered. You can get arrested for these kinds of things. That's the unwholesome Kamma based on my decisions to steal. But then also, it's wise to not assume that something can be taken or used. Let's just say I was a student and I was turning in a paper to my professor, and I see a stapler on the professor's desk and the professor's out of the room, and I need a stapler. And maybe I pick up their stapler and I get ready to staple my paper and turn it in. But now the professor walks in and sees me getting ready to use their stapler. And they're like, "Hey, what's going on? That's my stapler. What are you doing?" Right? Maybe they get angry. They get frustrated. Maybe they're attached to their stapler. They don't want anybody else to use it. Well, now they get angry. They get frustrated. They're causing their own anger because they're attached to their stapler. But they don't realize that. They think that I'm causing their anger. And now they might actually fail me on the paper out of resentment, out of retaliation for this anger that they think that I'm causing. They might even fail me in the entire class, where instead, if I understand the natural law, I understand it's unwise to assume that I can use something. Instead, I'll wait for the professor to come back in and say, "Hey, professor, can I use your stapler?" They're either going to say yes or no, right? If they say yes, great, I can use their stapler. If they say no, you can't use it, okay, thank you so much. And now you go find it somewhere else. Maybe there's another professor that'll let you use their stapler. Or maybe you go to the store and you buy one, right? But the last thing you're interested in doing is just assuming that you can use something, right? So that's part of what the Buddha is helping you to understand here. Notice here where he says, accept what is given, right? This is where if you're in a society of people who are practicing generosity, that is helping to enhance those people's mind. When they're practicing generosity with you, it's enhancing the quality of their mind because they're training their mind to let go, right? So if somebody gave you something, what the Buddha teaches you to do is to accept it because it's helping them to enhance the quality of their mind, right? Whereas if you were to shut that down and you were saying, "No, I don't want that," it doesn't give them the opportunity to enhance the quality of their mind. And if you shut down enough people's generosity, more and more people aren't going to be interested in sharing with you. They're not going to practice generosity with you. So the Buddha teaches you to accept people's generosity. But remember, he's not teaching you black and white here, right? So if somebody was to offer you something like crystal methamphetamine or heroin, are you going to accept that? No, you're not going to accept that, right? So he's teaching you to move to this higher consciousness and be able to understand your mind and whether it would be wise or unwise to accept this thing. So if grandma offers you a sweater at the holidays and you look at that sweater and you know that you'll never wear that sweater, the Buddha teaches you to accept that, right? Because that's helping grandma's mind to be able to practice generosity. But if grandma gets angry that you maybe gave her sweater away to somebody else, well, that's grandma causing her own anger. You haven't caused that anger, because the option is you can give it to somebody else, or you can put it in your closet and it'll sit there for the next 20 years and nobody will ever use it. It'll just deteriorate. But you could give it to somebody else, and maybe somebody else gives it to somebody else, and somebody else gives it to someone else. After 6, 8, 10 different hands, somebody's going to look at that sweater and say, that's the most beautiful sweater I've ever seen. I'm going to wear that every day of my life, right? So essentially, all of these people got the benefit of practicing generosity instead of the sweater sitting in the closet and deteriorating, right? So the Buddha teaches you to accept what is given, but you need to look at each situation because it's unique. If there's heroin or crystal methamphetamine or cocaine that's being offered to you, of course you're not going to accept that. And even this one up here, assuming something can be taken or used, right? So let's just say, as I shared with you about the professor, right? I'm going to ask the professor before I use something. But let's just say I'm out in my village and one of the villagers are doing some yard work and they cut their arm and they're bleeding profusely out of their arm and they're bleeding out and they're going to be dead if they keep bleeding. Well, if I see one of my other neighbors have a fabric on their front porch and I can grab that fabric and I can wrap up a tourniquet on their arm and stop the bleeding, I'm just going to grab that tourniquet and do it. I'm not going to ring the doorbell and wait for my neighbor to come downstairs and this person's bleeding out and I'm just going to sit there and wait and wait and wait. Excuse me, neighbor, do you mind if I use your... No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to grab the fabric. I'm going to wrap it up on their arm. I'm going to send them off in the ambulance to the hospital, saving this person's life. But then, because I know this precept, I'm going to go to the neighbor, and after they're gone and on their way to the hospital, I'm going to be like, ding dong, hello neighbor, excuse me, sawadee-kap, so sorry, I took something off of your porch. I really apologize for this. There's this fabric here that I used for our neighbor to help them because they were bleeding. Can I replace this for you? Is there a place that I can go buy one of these for you? Or can I give you the money to replace this? Right? I'm going to do that because I understand this precept. And if I just took it from them, it would be unwise of me, right? So this is how you can navigate the world now, that you understand that it's not black and white, that the Buddha is teaching you to move to this higher consciousness and think through the decisions that you're making. And then this last one, where he talks about awaiting what is given. What he's talking about here is that it would be unwise to put expectations on other people, to require them to get you things. Let's just say you were living with a life partner or a roommate or something like this, and they were going on a business trip. If you were to go to this person and say, hey, buy me this and buy me that and buy me this and buy me that when you go to this place, you're loading this person up with a bunch of expectations of what you want. And now if they come back and they have what you want, you're happy. But if they don't have what you want, you're angry or frustrated. And now they're busy going around town trying to find the things that you asked them for, right? In this situation, the Buddha teaches you to be unwise to do that kind of thing. But now let's just say somebody comes to you, which has actually occurred to me on occasion, where a student will come to me and they'll say, hey, David, I'm going back to the USA for a few weeks, and then I'm going to come back to Chiang Mai. Would you like anything from the USA that I can bring you from the USA? In this situation, they're practicing generosity, right? And now they're asking me, hey, can I bring you something? So in this situation, you might say, sure, could you bring me this, right? This person's offering it to you. You are awaiting what is given. You haven't put expectations on them. So you're going to need to use your higher consciousness to think these things through and use the words of the Buddha as guidance for you. So do you guys have any questions on this precept? No questions? Okay. I don't see any questions anywhere. Okay. So now the third one. I'll read this one to you and then we'll talk about it. So the Buddha says, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women or men who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. Okay, so this part here where the Buddha is talking about having sex with someone who's protected by their mother, father, brother, sister, or relatives, what he's talking about here is having sex with minors. If we were to have sex with minors, this is going to be very impactful in their life, and it's going to lure them away from receiving the guidance that they need from their parents. And this can be very impactful to this person's life. If you've had sex before, you know how impactful it was to do that the very first time. And if somebody was doing this at a very young age, it's going to affect them in an unwholesome way, in a negative way. So the Buddha is teaching that it would be unwise to do that. And this is a unique situation where in most parts of the world, the natural law of Kamma matches to the human laws. In most places, there's human laws that have the same exact thing, but not everywhere. There's some places in the world where it's legal to have sex with an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child. But if you look at those places are typically really struggling with their political environment, with their economy and things like this. You can see a lot of challenges in their society because they're having so much sex with different people of all different ages, even minors, right? So here you can see the natural law of Kamma and how it affects the world if we choose to have sex with people who are of a young age. Here where the Buddha says, whose violation entails a penalty, this would be sex without consent. If we were to rape somebody or force them to have sex against their will, this is causing harm to that person, and harm can come to us in this situation. We can get beat up, we can get murdered, we can get arrested, and things of that nature. Here where the Buddha talks about abandoning unchastity, this is having sex with multiple partners. Do you guys know what chastity is? Have you ever heard of what chastity is, this word? So in ancient times, women used to wear metal underwear, and fathers used to have their young daughters wear this metal underwear. And the father would have the lock and key, and it was only the father that would be able to unlock the metal underwear. I can't imagine wearing metal underwear, but nonetheless, people did that in certain times, right? So this would be chastity, having sex with no one because this woman is wearing metal underwear. That would be chastity, right? So unchastity is just the opposite, where you're having sex with multiple people, countless people, right? Maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 different people in a week, for example. Well, if somebody was doing that, this is where you can experience sexually transmitted diseases, right? This is the unwholesome Kamma from our unwise decision to choose to go out and have sex with so many different people. We can also experience getting beat up and murdered. We can experience all different kinds of things because these different partners become jealous and they find out, and now we get beat up, we get murdered, our personal property, our material possessions get damaged, we lose our wealth and things of this nature. This is the unwholesome results of choosing to have sex with multiple people. Then one of the things that I share with people is that in some cultures, what we do is we choose to meet a partner. And then when we meet somebody, we might go to our family and say, hey, I'd like to have a relationship with this person. We're going to get married, but we don't have money to purchase our own home. Can we move in with you for a period of time? And then we'll save our money and then we'll go buy a house. And our parents or our aunts and uncles or grandparents might say, sure, no problem. You can live here. In this situation, they've accepted the relationship. This isn't what the Buddha is talking about here, where he says protected by mother, father, and all these other people. So in that kind of situation, the family has accepted the relationship, and you can feel comfortable moving in to the home in those situations. Here where the Buddha says, who are protected by teachings, that's someone who's decided to remain celibate. There's some people, as part of the path to enlightenment, they choose to eliminate sexual contact 100%. And if somebody was choosing to do that and you were to lure them away from that celibacy, it's actually causing harm to that person, because you can get to the second stage of enlightenment while still having sexual relationship. And your life in that second stage of enlightenment is going to be quite peaceful and quite enjoyable, but you're still going to experience discontentedness from time to time. You can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment, but maybe you just hang out in that second stage of enlightenment for a period of time. Oftentimes younger people will do this. If they learn about the path to enlightenment kind of young in their life, maybe in their teens or their 20s or 30s, they might be having a sexual relationship. So they do all the other work on the path to enlightenment, get to that second stage of enlightenment, and hang out there for a period of time. But at some point you might decide that you're done with the anger and the frustration and the agitation, and you'd like to move beyond the second stage of enlightenment until the third and the fourth stage. Because as long as you're having sex, when you're getting sex, you'll be happy and you'll experience pleasure from that sex, but it's only temporary. There's going to be times where you can't get sex and you're going to be frustrated or agitated or annoyed. This is what the mind does. And whether somebody's deciding to do that or not, it's a choice for them to make. But at some point, somebody might decide to move beyond that and decide to give up sexual contact 100%. And if somebody's chosen to do that, they're making their way towards enlightenment. And that person getting to enlightenment would be the very best thing for that person and for all the people around them. Because that person getting to enlightenment means that they're no longer experiencing anger, sadness, and frustration and all the other discontent feelings. And they have the wisdom of how to do that. And then they could help the people around them to be able to learn how to get to enlightenment themselves. So if we were to try to lure that person away from their celibacy, that's causing harm to that person and to countless other people. So the Buddha teaches that if someone's choosing to be celibate, that you don't lure that person away from their celibacy. So here in Thailand, they make this very easy for you, because people who wear orange robes and shave their heads, they're just choosing to be celibate, and you know that they're not having sex. Also here in Thailand, people who wear all white and shave their head and they're wearing white daily, they're also not having sex. I choose to wear all white. I don't have sex any longer, but I'm not advertising that, because if I was confronted with a situation to have sex, I wouldn't do that. But nonetheless, you can know that if somebody's wearing orange robes and shaving their hair, or someone's wearing white clothes and shaving their hair, they're choosing not to have sex. And if you were interested to have sex, you would find somebody who's interested in having sex, and then that would be helpful for you to practice this precept. There's actually situations where this hasn't occurred here recently in Thailand, and people are having all kinds of difficulties and all kinds of challenges with this. So it's wise to not have sex with someone who's choosing to be celibate. Then here where it says sex with people who are committed in relationships, or sex outside of relationships that you're committed to. So for example, if you were single and you were to bring somebody out of a current relationship that they have to have sex with them, this is going to cause harm, because now you're causing harm in this relationship. So this is where you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, your personal property can get destroyed, your reputation in the community can get damaged. And then the same thing is if you have a current committed relationship and you go outside that relationship to have sex, those same exact things can occur. And then if you were to have sex with someone who's human trafficked, this is someone who's being forced to have sex, typically for money. In this kind of environment, again, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get robbed, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. This is all the unwholesome Kamma as a result of our unwise decision. So that's why it would be unwise to do these things. So also there's paid sexual services where sometimes people are willingly providing their service, but it's paid for. And this is the same results of if someone was human trafficked, that if you went into a paid sexual service environment, even though that person is willingly choosing to offer their sexual services, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get robbed, you can get sexually transmitted diseases. These are all unwholesome Kamma as a result of our unwise decision. Notice here that the Buddha doesn't talk about same-gender relationships. right? The Buddha was aware of same-gender relationships during his lifetime because he talks about it essentially in his teachings, but he doesn't teach anything about it. He just observes that it's happening. But there's no harm between two loyal, loving, consenting adults that are choosing to have sex. If it's a male and a female, or a male and a male, or a female and a female, they're not causing harm to anybody. It's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex. And if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, which is the very first teaching of the Buddha, then you understand that there's never been a time in human history where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. If every man had sex with a woman and every woman had sex with a man, that would be permanence. And that doesn't exist. It's never existed from the beginning of humanity. Having sex with someone of the same gender isn't new. It's been going on since the beginning of time, ever since humans have existed on this planet. And the Buddha understood 2,500 years ago that same gender relationships doesn't cause any harm. So if you're someone who has same gender relationships, or you know someone who does, they're not causing any harm. But other people might get angry or frustrated, but you're not causing that anger. That person is craving permanence. They want every man to have sex with a woman, and they want every woman to have sex with a man. And then their anger arises when they don't get what they want, and this is coming from their ignorance. But you can be completely comfortable to know that you're not causing any harm. And I like to point out that this is how wise the Buddha was, that 2,500 years ago, he already understood this. We have people today that don't understand this, right? There's people all throughout the world that think that somehow someone who's having a same-gender relationship is causing harm in the world. They're not causing any harm, and there's no way that every single person is going to choose to have sex with the opposite gender. That would be permanence, and we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that things are constantly changing, and there's not such thing as permanence within this material world. So if someone has a same-gender relationship, you're not causing any harm to anybody. And if somebody chooses to get angry, you're not causing that harm. We can also understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha. If you understand the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different, the idea that the mind coming into this body is going to identify as the same as the sexual organs, if that occurred every single time, that would be permanence. It's not the physical body that determines what gender somebody is. It's the mind. And the mind could have been female, 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 female in previous existences in the cycle of rebirth, and now that mind ended up in a body that has male sexual organs, but the mind identifies as a female, right? So we can understand through the universal truth of impermanence and the cycle of rebirth that transgender individuals are completely normal. There's never going to be a time in history where everybody identifies with the same gender as the physical body, because there's the physical body that has sexual organs, and then there's the mind. And these two things oftentimes are different in what they identify as. So if somebody has this kind of situation where you have friends that are transgender, or you yourself are transgender, it's completely normal. And if other people get angry and frustrated, they're causing it themselves. It's not you. So that's why the Buddha doesn't say anything about that here, because this was going on during his lifetime as well. And he actually explains it and talks about it in his teachings, but he doesn't teach anything about it. He just observes that it's happening. Sometimes people ask me about masturbation, because sometimes people have been taught, never masturbate. It's going to cause harm. Don't masturbate. Don't masturbate. Well, masturbation can actually be used in a beneficial way, but it can also be harmful too. It just depends on how you're using it. So if somebody was, say, listening to this talk and they hear about this particular precept, and maybe they realize they have 5 boyfriends or 5 girlfriends or 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends, and they're like, you know what? The Buddha was actually accurate here. I should bring this down to just one person. Having so many boyfriends and girlfriends isn't wise for me, and I'd like to bring this down to one person. Well, now, maybe as they're doing that, their sexual craving is really high, and they decide to use some masturbation in order to knock that down. And now they use that in order to get to the point where they're just having sex with one person. Well, this was very beneficial. This is producing wholesome results. Or let's just say somebody was interested in raping another individual, but they choose to use masturbation instead. This was actually very helpful. It produced wholesome results. So it's not like masturbation is all wonderful or it's all harmful. It can actually be used in a beneficial way. If you understand about dams, there's these multi-million-dollar structures that cost millions and millions of dollars to create. And they build them and they hold back water. And then as this water builds up on the dam and it becomes higher and higher, what they do in order to protect the dam is they open up the dam and they let the water out. And then when the water goes down slowly over multiple days, they will then close the dam again. And this is how they protect the multi-million-dollar structure of the dam. Well, when you're training your mind with these teachings and your mind is getting further and further away from sexual contact, you might notice a lot of pressure building up in your mind where you have this urge to have sex, but you just can't get it, or you're choosing not to have sex. And now you might decide to use some masturbation to release the pressure out of the mind. And maybe you went 1 week, 2 weeks without sex, and then you decide to use some masturbation to knock down the urge to have sex. But now after you've done that, now maybe you go 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 8 weeks without sex. But then the pressure builds up again and you use some masturbation to knock that down. But now maybe you go 3 months, 4 months, 6 months without having sex, and then you use some masturbation to knock that down. So masturbation can actually be used in a helpful and beneficial way in these kinds of examples. But it can also be used in a harmful way too. This is where it's not black and white. Let's just say somebody was masturbating excessively, maybe 10, 15, 20 times a day, right? This is increasing their sensual desire and is causing their mind to crave sex more and more and more. So you need to be able to look at, what are you doing? Are you decreasing your sensual desire, producing wholesome kamma? Or are you increasing your sensual desire and producing unwholesome kamma? That's where you can see that masturbation can actually sometimes be used beneficially, but it can also be harmful as well. Sex with animals is one of the few things that is actually black and white, right? An animal can't give us consent to have sex with it. And I imagine if someone chose to have sex with an animal, there would be disease or injury or things like this that would occur. So it would be unwise to do that. Sometimes people ask me about pornography, and I wrote in the book quite a bit of details about this, where I help people to understand that oftentimes what's in the mind is there's a craving for sexual contact, and someone might decide to go down this path of pornography. And if you've ever done that before, you know that your mind can get very addicted to that, and to come out of that can be very challenging. And then even when you do come out of that, it's almost like the mind is kind of trapped in this fantasy world, and even when you start having sex with human beings again, that it never quite lives up to the satisfaction of what you were experiencing when your mind was in this fantasy world. So what I encourage people to do, that if they're interested in having sex with a partner, is to actually have sex with a partner and move in that direction rather than move towards pornography, because the mind can get addicted to this and it's very hard to come out of that. So do you guys have any questions on this third precept? No questions? Okay, let me see if we have any questions here. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so now let's go to the fourth precept. This one's very clear-cut and very straightforward. The Buddha says, abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So the Buddha is teaching us to be truthful here, right? And it's wise to do that, because we can see in the situations where we haven't been truthful that there's a craving, there's a desire, there's something that the mind wants. And the mind thinks that if I lie, I'm going to be able to get what I want. Whereas if I tell the truth, I'm not going to be able to get what I want. So there's a craving, desire, attachment there that the mind's longing, yearning for. And if you've ever done a lot of lying, you know that your mind was obsessively trying to figure out what you said to one person versus what you said to the other. And now how can you get to peace and joy if your mind is having to constantly figure out what you said to one person versus another? So if you're interested in getting to peace and joy, that you're going to need to be able to tell the truth truth in all situations, because then your mind can be at ease and you don't have to figure out what you say from one person to the next. You just speak the truth. The Buddha understood this so well that this is another teaching that I put in here to be able to help you guys to see, even when the Buddha told a joke, he didn't tell a lie. Here he's teaching his son Rahula. Sometimes people think the Buddha left his family and never came back. This isn't actually true. He actually spent time with his family, his son, his wife, his mother, his cousins and brother-in-laws. All these people were ordaining with him to learn how to get to enlightenment. So here he's teaching his son Rahula, and he's explaining to his son that it would be unwise to tell a joke that has a lie in it. Now, you might not associate a Buddha as someone who tells jokes, right? But a Buddha has a personality. They have a character. Sometimes what you see with these pictures of the Buddha and these statues, you see him being all solemn and meditating and all this kind of stuff, right? Well, of course, a Buddha meditates to a certain degree, but they don't walk around being solemn and serious all the time. Who would be interested in getting to enlightenment if you just walked around being serious and solemn all the time, right? That's not what enlightenment is. Enlightened beings have fun. They're cheerful. They're bright. They're radiant. They're enjoying every aspect of their life. So a Buddha tells jokes, right? They have a personality, right? But when they tell jokes, they tell truthful jokes. Now, oftentimes when people tell jokes, they might lie, but they also might tell degrading and diminishing jokes, degrading other people, or even degrading yourself. If you're going to tell jokes, you don't have to do those kinds of things. That would be unwise. It's going to damage your reputation, right? So the Buddha, if you can imagine that if he was in classes like this, sharing this deep wisdom to be able to help people get to enlightenment, but maybe on the side, he was telling lies when he was telling jokes. Well, when he was teaching, people wouldn't know whether he was telling the truth or not, right? So the Buddha got to the point where he told the truth even when he was telling jokes. Telling truthful jokes is actually more challenging. It takes a lot more wisdom to tell truthful jokes. But because you're trying to apply more effort and wisdom to be able to tell these kinds of jokes, they're typically more funny. And when you actually get to the point where you're telling these types of jokes regularly, you actually become very skilled at telling truthful jokes. So right now, if the jokes that you tell are not truthful, that's okay. That's where you're at. But over time, you would like to get to the point where you're speaking the truth in all situations, including when you're telling jokes, because then you can be trustworthy, dependable, and not a deceiver of the world. You can be reliable because people are going to discover your lies. They're going to find out when you're lying, and now they're not going to necessarily see you as being trustworthy. And in your professional and your personal life, you will have challenges in those situations. So if there's a project that maybe your boss is interested in staffing you on, if they know that you're not truthful, they're probably not going to staff you on that project, because this project could actually help your career to develop and move forward, and you would like to be able to be staffed on that project. So if you tell the truth in all situations, your mind can be at ease, where you don't have to constantly figure out what you're saying from one situation to the next, and now people will see you as being trustworthy and dependable, and you'll see your life will move forward more and more and more. So any questions on this particular precept? The fourth one? No questions? Okay. All right. So now the fifth one. This is the last one. The Buddha says, refrain from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So remember, anytime you're studying the teachings of the Buddha and you don't understand something, you're going to need to figure that out. You're going to need to investigate and examine that. And sometimes that means coming to a teacher to be able to ask questions, but other times you can find some of these things out on your own. Like if you ran across this teaching and you didn't know what the word heedlessness means, you'd like to investigate that. You'd like to figure that out, right? So maybe you pull out a dictionary and you look. Well, if you pull out a dictionary and you look to see what does that word mean, it means careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful. So anytime you're putting a substance into the body that's producing that, you're actually taking your mind in the opposite direction of enlightenment. Because what the Buddha teaches you to do is to have mindfulness, to have awareness of mind. This is what's actually going to help you to be able to move the mind to enlightenment. Because if you're not aware of what's going on in your own mind, you're not going to be able to see the unwholesome qualities and the wholesome qualities, because you're going to need to eliminate the unwholesome qualities out of your mind, and you're going to need to produce wholesome qualities in your mind. So if you don't have mindfulness, you wouldn't be able to do that. So if you take drugs and intoxicants and substances that are producing heedlessness, you're walking in the opposite direction of enlightenment. And the Buddha puts these precepts in an order for a certain reason, because if you don't practice this precept, you're more likely to break all the others. You're more likely to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, and to lie. Because if your mind is heedless, where you're unthoughtful, unattentive, unmindful, and you're careless, you're going to tend to make unwise decisions, and then it's going to produce unwholesome results in your life. If you go to a place where people are locked up in prison or jail, and you talk to them and you say, why are you guys here? Why are you girls here? They might tell you that they're there for murder, or they're there for robbing a bank, or whatever it is. But if you talk to them in detail, you're like, no, like, tell me really, like, why are you here? They'll tell you it's because of this. About 80% of the people who are in jail will tell you it's because of substances, because they'll say that if I wasn't high on drugs, I would have never killed that person. Or if I didn't have a drug habit, I would have never robbed that bank. I was trying to get money to feed my drug habit, right? So this particular precept is going to help you to ensure that you can make wise decisions in all parts of your life. So there's several substances that we might decide to talk about as it relates to this precept, because it's not black and white in some of these cases. So for example, like marijuana, we know that there's some medical benefit with this plant. It's irrefutable that there's children who have like 20 seizures a day, and they give them a little CBD oil on the tongue, and they don't have another seizure for like 6 months. Right? So that we know that there's medical benefits with this plant. But this plant can also be used for heedlessness too. Each situation's a little bit different. So you need to be able to look at what you're using the plant for and how you're using it to determine of whether it would be wise or not. So if somebody was using this plant for medical reasons, they will typically be looking for what's called a high CBD. If they're looking for a high, they're looking for high THC. These are the two different sides of the plant. CBD is the medical properties, and THC are the properties that produce the high. So if someone's looking for medical benefits of a plant, they're going to be looking for high CBD and low THC. And they're typically going to take it through an edible or an oil. Where someone who's looking for a high, they're usually looking for a high THC, and they're most likely smoking it, although there's other ways to ingest it for a high as well. So if you're going to take this plant, you need to make sure you have a valid medical reason to take it. If you're taking it for stress or anxiety or these kinds of things, it's not going to solve that, because all this is going to do is cover that up, because the true cause of something like stress or anxiety is craving, desire, attachment. This is what the teachings of the Buddha are going to help you to be able to solve. So marijuana isn't going to allow you to solve your stress and anxiety. It's just going to cover it up. And when you're not using marijuana, you're stressed, you're having anxiety. So you can eliminate the stress and anxiety by eliminating the underlying cause, which is the craving, desire, attachment. Something like cigarettes, we know that this doesn't have any medical benefits, and more we see people are understanding that and getting away from cigarettes. So if you're currently smoking, it would be wise for you to move away from this, because there's all kinds of drugs and intoxicants in there that are causing your mind and your body to have challenges. You need to pay attention to your prescription medications. If someone's giving you a medication, some of these medications, even though they're meant to help and improve the health of the body, they can actually be addictive. So if somebody gives you a prescription, we live in the information age, we can look that up and we can see whether or not it's addictive or not. And if you look it up and you find out that it's addictive, you might ask your doctor, hey, is there something else that you can prescribe here besides this medication? And they might say, oh yeah, sure, we have these other medications, we can give you these instead. But what you might get back is the doctor says, no, there's no other medication. This is the only thing that's going to work for your situation. And if you find that out, that's actually really good information to have, because now when you're taking that medication, you know that it's addictive and you can try to get off of it as soon as possible, that you only use it for a limited period of time. So you need to pay attention to prescription medications because they can be addictive and they can cause heedlessness, and you like to be able to get off of those as soon as possible. Then you would be wise to pay attention to your caffeine intake. Caffeine is actually a stimulant. It takes the mind up into this excited state. And then when you're not having caffeine, you can drop off and be sleepy and tired. And as long as you're relying on caffeine to lift your mind up, that means it's also going to drop off at different times as well. By the time you get to enlightenment, you have sustainable energy all day long, that you don't get exhausted or tired. An unenlightened being will get exhausted or tired at the end of their day. They will sometimes feel exhausted or tired. An enlightened being doesn't experience that. Their mind is bright and cheerful and uplifted. They have sustainable energy all day long. Well, the way that you do that is through cultivation of the mind and through training the mind. If you rely on caffeine, your mind's going to lift up like this, and then it's going to drop back down. You never allow the mind to build sustainable energy all day long. So if you choose to get away from caffeine, you'll be able to build that sustainable energy where you can maintain your energy all day long. But you're not going to be able to do that as long as you rely on caffeine. So you might decide to move away from that. And if you do decide to move away from caffeine, you might actually go through withdrawal symptoms. Let this remind you that you're detoxing from a drug. Just like if someone was on heroin or cocaine or something like this, they would detox from that substance. If you're getting away from caffeine, you might have headaches, you might have dry mouth, you might have shakes or things like this. You might notice these kinds of things. And this is the detoxing that the body is doing from this stimulant or from this drug. We learn as we grow up to even pay attention to our sugar intake, that if we took excessive amount of sugar, it can actually produce a high. We tend to learn that by the time we're like, 10, 12, 15 years old. We tend to not do those things anymore. But even sugar could be something that produces heedlessness. Right? The Buddha, the way he teaches here with this word heedlessness is it's timeless. It can apply through all of time, right? He didn't give you a specific list of substances because he knew from the time that he taught, as time went on, that people would invent different substances and he wouldn't have been able to name what all those substances are. So if there's any substance that's going to produce heedlessness, he's teaching you to avoid that because that's going to help you to produce mindfulness and actually make your way to enlightenment. So now and forever, you can apply this teaching because he spoke in a way that is timeless, that if there's any substance that you would put into the body that would cause heedlessness, he's teaching you that it'd be unwise to continue to ingest that. But whether you choose to do that or not, it's a choice for you. And then this last one here is psychedelic substances. Some of these didn't even exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. Things like LSD or PCP or things like that. He could have never imagined that we would have created things like that. But if we understand his teachings of heedlessness, then we understand that it's unwise to take psychedelic substances. Now, some people will tell you that psychedelic substances will actually help you to get to enlightenment. And this isn't actually true. This is people who just aren't understanding. What psychedelic substances do is they do promote the mind to be more introspective and inward looking, but it's just for a temporary period of time as long as you're using that substance. When that substance is gone, that introspection is also gone. And in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be introspective and look inward at all parts of your day. So you might be in a conversation with your boss or your mom or somebody like this, and you're starting to have difficulties or struggles or challenges in that conversation. And you need to be introspective and figure out what would be wise to say in this situation. Well, if you don't have introspection, you're not going to be able to make a wise decision in that situation. And you can't say to your mom, like, hey, mom, can you hold on? I need to go take these magic mushrooms. I'll be right back. Or, hey, mom, I need to go drop a hit of LSD. What you're asking me right now is very intense and I need to get some introspection here. I'm sorry. I'll be back in about an hour after this LSD kicks in, right? You're not going to be able to do that. You're going to need to be introspective all throughout your day. And if you rely on something like a psychedelic substance to be able to promote that introspection, then your mind isn't able to naturally create that on its own so that you can be introspective all throughout your day. So psychedelic substances aren't actually helping you get to enlightenment. They're actually hindering you because your mind isn't actually able to create and promote and develop that introspection that you're going to need all throughout your day. So this is the fifth precept. Any questions on this one? All right. I don't see any questions anywhere. Oh, we have a question here. Maybe from Gloria. Okay. So Gloria is asking, sometimes I want to find someone to accompany me, not for sex, but to keep myself accompanied. How to eliminate the loneliness. So you're going to need to train your mind to be comfortable being alone. The way that you eliminate your loneliness is not by being around other people, because those other people are only temporary. It's not permanent. So if your mind's attached to being with other people and you can only feel satisfied when you're with other people, that means you have a craving to be around other people. You're going to need to do things like go on vacation by yourself, go to the movies by yourself, take yourself out to dinner, maybe that nice restaurant. Maybe you would only go when you're with other people, but go by yourself. Train your mind to be comfortable and enjoy being with yourself. Because if you don't enjoy being with yourself, why would anybody ever enjoy being with you, right? So you're going to need to learn how to enjoy being with yourself, and you're going to need to put the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in, which is be alone, and train your mind to be comfortable, be content, and be joyful even when you're alone. And of course, you're going to need the Eightfold Path to be able to have that ongoing training with the Eightfold Path, but then you're going to need to put the mind in these kinds of situations where you are alone from time to time. And then the follow-up question here is, and what is the meaning of relationship for Buddhism? Well, the Buddha doesn't really give a definition of what a relationship is, but we can understand that through our own understanding that, a relationship is two people choosing to spend time with each other. That's a relationship, but you can also have relationships where you're not spending time with each other. There's some students who come and learn with me for 3, 4, 5, 6 months or a year or two, but then they go away for 5 months, 6 months, even year, 2, 3 years, they go away and they're practicing what they've learned. So there's still a relationship there. There's still, some fondness. There's still ability to get help. So we can look at a dictionary to see what is the definition of a relationship. But it's essentially, two people choosing to spend time with each other or have some kind of interaction with each other, where nowadays it doesn't necessarily involve spending time with each other. It can also have a relationship where you're not seeing each other. There's people in my wife's life who she teaches Thai massage sometimes, and there's students that she taught 14, 15, 16 years ago, and she hasn't even heard from them in all of that time, but they will call her up and they'll say, hey, I would like to get some more training with you. Can I come back and learn with you? And of course, come on back, right? There's still a relationship there, even though there hasn't been time that they've spent together. So you can have a relationship either spending time with each other or away from each other. That's possible as well. Okay, so I don't see any other questions anywhere throughout all of our platforms. Oh, you have a question, Alejandro? Sure. Go ahead.
I have a question about sugar because...
About what?
The sugar, for example.
Sugar, yes.
I found that in many foods here, for example, in Thailand, they have sugar. For example, I order a smoothie, even I order without sugar. Mm-hmm. They have later like milk with sugar, or sometimes they use it sugar in many kind of foods. For example, the curry is made by sugar, and if you don't cultivate to know where is the sugar, you are going to be eating all day. So it's part of wisdom also to understand where you have it, so it doesn't happen that you are eating all the day this kind of sugar.
Yeah, you need to look at your food intake and make sure that you're taking in the food that this body needs. The Thai food is based on their traditional medicine, that in their traditional medicine system, they have, I think it's 9 flavors, and there's 9 different flavors like bland, sour, sweet, astringent, things like this. And they actually treat the body through food. They look at food as medicine. And there's a certain amount of sugar or sweet food that offsets other things like hot and spicy, and it affects the body in certain positive ways. So Thai people, if they've studied these kinds of things, they will know certain conditions of the body. They will know to eat certain foods. You can see that they will eat certain foods at different times of the year, and based on the condition of the body, they will eat certain foods. So the sugar actually serves a purpose in Thai food, but if you don't know what that purpose is and you just went around eating a bunch of sweet foods, it could cause challenges for you. So you would like to definitely have that wisdom to be able to understand, because the wisdom that you learn about the natural laws to be able to get to enlightenment, that's a certain type of wisdom. But there's also other wisdom in the world about how to maintain the health of this body and the physical body, which the Buddha doesn't teach, because that's going to change and that's going to evolve over time. And each human being is going to need a certain amount of wisdom to understand how to care for this body. Like we need to learn how to drink water and how to eat fruits and vegetables and things like this, which the Buddha doesn't cover any of those things, because he knows that people can figure that out other places. He just teaches you that it's wise to take care of this body, and then you make the decisions to do that. So if you're noticing that excessive amount of sugar in one particular cultural food or another isn't good for your body, then you know to avoid those kinds of things and reduce it or eliminate it from what you choose to take in. And this would be a wise choice for you that's going to produce wholesome Kamma or wholesome results.
Thank you. And another question, when you refer in having multiple relationships with multiple partners, a partner doesn't mean to be like your boyfriend or girlfriend, because some people confuse the name partner. So you refer different individuals as a partner for that meaning.
Yeah, so there's two sides of that I was teaching. I was teaching that it would be unwise to have multiple partners, meaning like, yeah, if you had multiple life partners or boyfriends or girlfriends, that would be unwise because you're having sex with multiple people. But also, even if you didn't consider this person a partner, but just a sexual partner, right? Like if you were, let's just say, I know not necessarily you, Alejandro, but people have told me that they use like online apps and they can hook up with people, you know, a different person every day. They can have sex with a different person every day. And these different apps makes it really easy for them to be able to hook up with somebody and have sex with a different person almost every day. In this kind of situation, you might not consider that person a life partner, but they are a sexual partner. And now, as part of doing that, you can experience sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, murdered, you can get robbed, you can experience a depletion of your wealth, of having to maintain this type of lifestyle. This is all the unwholesome results that we experience as a result of choosing to have multiple partners. Whereas if you have one loyal, loving, committed relationship and you build that up over time, you guys can create so much success in your life together, where if you're jumping around from partner to partner to partner to partner to partner, by the time you get towards the end of your life and you become older, you haven't been loyal and committed to anybody. So therefore, nobody's loyal and committed to you. So when you need help, when you're sick and you're ill and you're getting older and you need help in your life, you don't have anybody around you to help you because you haven't been loyal and committed to anybody in your life. So it would be wise, if you're going to have sex, to get to the point where you have a loyal, loving, committed relationship. And that can be challenging nowadays because there's so many people out there that are kind of hooking up, you know, so often and so frequently that you really got to sort through that and find somebody who's really interested in a serious relationship with just one partner.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, so I don't see any other questions anywhere. So I'm just going to end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys would like to learn more, you're more than welcome to. I'm actually going to be starting a retreat today at 3 p.m. here, where from 3 to 5 p.m. we're going to start our retreat I'm going to teach what is enlightenment, and I'm going to introduce the retreat and help people to understand what it is. And then Monday through Friday this week, I'm going to be holding sessions from 9 a.m. in the morning until 12:30 in the afternoon. And then at 12:30, we're going to go out and do excursions in the community. And then at 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. here at the temple, I'm going to be teaching again. And I'm going to be teaching topics related to getting to enlightenment and purification of the mind. This is where I'm going to be spending a lot of time teaching each individual fetter what it is, the symptoms of it, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've eliminated it. These are the 10 individual pollutions that are are in the mind. The first day of Sunday and then on Monday, I'm going to be teaching some kind of beginning teachings to just help people get started. But then as we move beyond that, I'm going to be moving into the fetters and explaining what these are in detail. These are the 10 pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind, and you need to know how to eliminate them, because that's what's actually going to produce enlightenment. So we're going to be doing this over the course of this week, and you're welcome to come in and out of this as you like, because sometimes people say they work in the morning and they could come in the evening. You're fine to do that. Or if you like to come in the morning and not come in the evening, it's up to you if you'd like to do that. But I'm going to be teaching it here at the temple, and I'm going to be live streaming it as well on Facebook, YouTube, and you can also join by Zoom, so you can come in live. And if you can't attend live, it's recorded, so you could be able to see it on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook group. And then it's also been recorded in the past, and it's on our podcast, so you'd be able to see it there as well. So if you guys would like to learn more, that's what I'm going to be doing over the coming weeks, or the coming week. This Friday, we also have movie night, where every Friday we come together from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We have a little bit of a kind of like a party here at the temple, where this particular Friday we're having movie night, where we have our popcorn machine out. We make all this really delicious popcorn and we watch a movie together. It's a great time to come together with other members of the community and just have a social event. So if you'd like to come, we're going to be showing a movie. It's called, this particular movie is a documentary from the BBC. It's called Jesus Christ as a Buddhist Monk. The BBC did some research where Jesus Christ kind of disappears from the Bible from the age of 13 to 29. And there's people who say that he was actually studying Buddhism during that period of time. So the BBC investigated this and tried to figure out if this is actually true or if it's false. So if you'd like to see that documentary, we're going to be showing it this Friday at 6 p.m. And you're welcome to come and join and have some popcorn and socialize with people if you'd like to do that. So again, thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys at one of these future events. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee krap. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.